The first is about writing news on a solo show. I work on a solo show. I'm on all by myself, and I've got to be both the news person and the responder. How do I do it? How do I apply these principles on my show?
I think the same rules apply. I would do this same style and same delivery you're doing for the rest of the show, not totally change your tone for those kind of segments where it's a left turn. And I would choose the topics that you can add to, personalize, localize, and focus on those.
On a solo show, you're having a conversation with the audience. So again, to Andy's point, yes, the precepts are the same. You're gonna go ahead and get into those three stories and then give your perspective about them, as opposed to delivering three news stories.
And the important thing there is that you tell it to me, don't read it to me. So if you can get into a mindset where I'm with my best friend at the bar or the coffee shop, or we're having lunch and we're talking about this, and picture that, so you're telling me the story instead of reading me the story, that'll help you slow the pace down. And pace is an important thing there. When you're on by yourself and delivering information, it's somewhat natural to start speeding up, and sometimes you start speeding up beyond what's natural and comfortable. So work on managing that pace. So imagine that you're having a one-on-one conversation with someone in that same room with you, and you're making eye contact. Just happens that they're not actually there. Next question.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Mike.
Nothing sounds worse than somebody reading to me, even if it is a relatable story. If it sounds like it's a newscast, it's a newscast, and I'm gone.
Yeah, if you go back to the audio we played from KBLX, listen to how Fresca told those stories. She didn't sound like she was reading it at all. She was just telling you what was happening there, which is great. And that brings us to the next question, which is, should I write the stories and read them conversationally, or should I create bullet points and ad lib from that? What's the best way to do that?
I mean, it's whatever works for you. You got to figure out. I mean, there are people that can script it and not sound scripted, but most people work better with bullet points, in my experience.
Yeah, I agree that typically bullet points, I mean, you do have to use what works for you, but bullet points, and use common, language. If it's a story about a guy who did something, say it's a guy who did something, not you don't use suspects and all that AP, all those words that just reek of news delivery.
Yeah. I worked with a personality that was doing afternoons on a station, and she sounded so completely relaxed and natural. And I commented on that, and she said, "That's amazing that you said that, because I script everything that I say." Mm-hmm. I said, "You've got to be kidding." And she literally wrote a script for every break that she did. And I said, "Why do you do that?" She said, "Because it makes me focus on what I want to say. It helps me with word economy. And by writing it, I learn it better. So when I read it back, I don't get sidetracked. I don't get off course. And I've already learned it. So it doesn't sound like I'm reading it." And that worked for her. With others, if they bullet point it out and they just ad lib from the bullet points, that's great. Just make sure that doesn't become a lazy excuse for prep. You still have to know your content and be able to ad lib from it.
Yeah, like you said, for some people, writing is rehearsing. As they're writing it, they're kind of rehearsing it in their head. And so it's another way to kind of practice it,
Yeah, but I think the pivotal point is you got to prep it. Again, you can't wing this stuff and expect it to work.
Next question is, one of your points was that you should be light on facts and heavy on personality. Would you expand on that a little bit more? Which I think we kind of did throughout the course.
Yeah, I mean, the point is there are plenty of places to get the facts, and we're there to add our take on it, our commentary to it, something that only we can do. And so if you're just, plus I get lost in the facts if you're just giving me a litany of them.
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about the economy and we're getting into GDP numbers and what the Dow started with and ended at, that has nothing to do with the story. The story is, hey, there's some challenging economic news that just came out, and how does that relate to you?
Jim in the chat box says, "I like the 3 things to know, but another station and another market is using that phrase, and the signal does get into our market. Is that a name that we should avoid?"
I don't program away from stuff like that. I just do it better than they do it. But you guys may have a different take.
I tend to agree with you, Andy, but I mean, if there's you want people to buy into what they're doing. If they feel reticent about doing it, you know, there are other names that work. I mean, trending or what's trending works fine. I mean, there are other names or other handles for this that I think position the feature well.
Yeah, don't get so wrapped up in your programming box where you're listening to other stations and are so aware of everything other radio stations are doing that it makes you lose sight of how the audience is actually hearing and consuming audio. Chances are, especially if they're in a different format, I don't know, even if they're in the same format, but chances are they don't listen enough or pay close enough attention to recognize the duplication anyway. And also realize that nobody listens for that feature. They listen for the information that's in that feature. So the name is somewhat irrelevant. I mean, how many late night talk shows? It's late night with Letterman, or it's the late show with Jimmy Kimmel. I don't even know what their names are, but they're all very similar. They're almost exactly the same thing. What's different is the content that's inside of it. So I wouldn't shrink away from it if that's the absolute best name that you can come up with and it's one that you love. I would go ahead and use it. I wouldn't let that scare me off of it. But to Mike's point, there are plenty of others that you can use too. Info 360, Info to Go, trending, 3 things you should know. That there's all kinds of things. It's not like the name of the feature is going to make or break it.
No,